Thank you, Senator. General Nakasone, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is essential for the national defense and 1 is nice to have, where would you rank Section 702?
10 plus. And let me talk a little bit about 702. Thank you, Senator, for that question. As you know, FAA 702 allows the U.S. intelligence community to collect the information and communications of foreign targets of interest operating outside the United States that use U.S. infrastructure and services. So outside the United States, the intelligence community can collect against foreign targets of interest. It's critical for what we do. And what have we seen since FAA 702 was enacted in 2008 and reauthorized 2 times? It's disrupted terrorist plots. It's alerted us to cyber attacks. And finally, it's uncovered CI threats. Last year, we were able to utilize this in a series of ransomware and a series of being able to uncover what adversaries were trying to do to us against our critical infrastructure. And most importantly, as General Fenton can testify, is what we were able to do against Zawahiri. An essential piece that we need as a nation.
I think the key word is essential. Thank you, General. Talk to me about the relationship between electronic warfare and cyber. Who's in charge of electronic warfare? Because in a conflict, electronic warfare and cyber is going to be where it begins.
So traditionally, the services had electronic warfare capabilities that they deploy with their forces. I think what you speak to is a synchronization of this battlefield and cyberspace, which we are starting now to work very, very closely with the combatant commands.
I'm concerned that if electronic warfare is scattered among the services, it's not going to have the attention, for example, that cyber has, because we have cyber command. And electronic warfare is definitely going to be part of the conflict, whether it's jamming or disabling satellite communications, those kinds of things. There's no central, what you're telling me is it's not part of your command, and there's no central command that controls it.
It is not part of my command, but again, a lot of the electronic warfare is done in support of service requirements, and so they have service forces that do this. I think what you're speaking to, Senator, is much in the same way we have tactical forces that assist the services. Is there some type of national capability that we might need? And I think that's something that we have to look very carefully at.
I worry about coordination and duplication, two sides of the same coin. You mentioned briefly in your opening statement election interference in 2022. Is election interference in terms of cyber an ongoing problem? Hasn't gone away?
It hasn't gone away. This is something we will deal with for as long as I can look at the future and we see cyberspace and the ability for adversaries to influence what goes on.
Is it things like hacking and meddling with the system, or is it more in terms of disinformation?
So what we have seen, Senator, really, when you talk about infrastructure, that's more of an interference piece. We see the influence piece much more prevalent these days, and being able to, operating outside the United States, go after trolls and other different actors that are trying to create influence.
And these can be Russia, Iran, North Korea, China. They're actively involved in trying to affect and interfere in our politics. Is that correct?
You've hit the top 4 plus proxies.
China cyber capability, is it on the rise? They've been not as aggressive in terms of elections and interference as the Russians have been over the last 10 years or so. Is China starting to become more aggressive? Are you seeing more activity, less worry about reputational risk and those kinds of things? So
they have a different playbook, I think, than the Russians from what we've seen. The other piece is that, as I mentioned last year, this is a very capable force. And so we can cover many of the areas that I can discuss in closed testimony, but again, a very formidable foe.
The new National Cyber Strategy was just issued last week. Any gaps? I don't expect you to criticize it, but do you have any suggestions you can share with us?
I'm really pleased with the National Cyber Strategy. I think that this is something that we've long wanted in terms of what's the responsibility of both the government and the private sector, and being able to meld that is critically important for us. I think in the weeks to come, obviously, the Department of Defense's cyber strategy will nest within that. And so I think for the first time, we'll probably have, from the government all the way down to our department, something that's very effective.
Think of that a coherent government-wide strategy.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, General. Senator Budd.
Thank you all for being here. So General Fenton, there's been a series of concerning incidents, suicides, murders, overdoses, drug trafficking arrests surrounding the Special Operations community at Fort Bragg. But I think you and the members here of the committee, we know that those reports, they're not indicative of the thousands of incredible men and women at USASOC. I'm hoping that you can discuss some of the issues that we're actually seeing at Bragg, including those. And if you can describe what SOCOM is doing to combat these challenges. And I would also say that our office is here to help, and I'm sure on both sides of the aisle, all of us are here on your team in that regard.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for an ability to comment on that, for an opportunity. That very issue hits at the heart of our number one priority, our people, who are our competitive and comparative advantage and who we place a lot of trust and confidence in. And this type of behavior, atypical to the 70,000 plus that are doing the right thing almost every single day, each and every day, a majority are absolutely doing that, is first and foremost, it disrespects that type of work that our SOCOM enterprise is known for. Second, it certainly is not behavior that's welcome. I'd want everybody to know that is not the type of behavior that's welcome in this formation, and is not indicative of an organization in whom the nation has placed a lot of trust. We hold ourselves to a higher standard. And the Command Sergeant Major and I are, first of all, we're very angry when we get reports like that, and we're deliberately laser-like focused on this. And in fact, we talk about it as a corrosive. These are corrosives toward the trust and confidence that this committee, the Secretary, and certainly the nation has in us. And we're laser focused on eradicating that from SOCOM enterprise. One is too many, but we recognize we're not immune. So we look at it through a number of lenses. First is it's a leader issue in preventing this, reinforcing the standards that behavior of drug, some type of other untoward, illegal, not moral, not ethical behavior is not who we are, not what we want in our formation. And we ask our whole formation to be on alert and to help point that out for us and let us as leaders start to take action. Second, it is reinforcing policies that tell folks this. In the event they just came into this formation, they didn't know any better. And they're at risk of doing something like that that disrespects decades of successful operations and many, many who came before and those who come after. Responding, I think a key piece in that one is holding folks accountable. And you'll see us do that because that sends a very big signal back when appropriate, Senator, back to the enterprise about this behavior is absolutely not welcome and not part of the SOCOM enterprise. So you got my commitment on this, Senator. I've been in about 6 months. It's been a top priority because of what it does, not only the trust that this committee and others have in the SOCOM team, but to our overall readiness. And that readiness is important because it needs to be a very lethal force each and every time the Secretary puts us on the job.
Thank you, and you have our commitment as well. Secretary Meyer and also General Fenton, you've talked a little bit about this today, but can you please expand on balancing the need for Special Operations Forces to continue conducting counterterrorism in the Middle East and Africa versus the important role they play in great power competition? And do we have the right mix of forces to accomplish both? We'll start with you, Secretary.
So, Senator, thanks for this point. This is maybe among the most important points that I focus on every day, and I think the answer is somewhat. So I think we have a very lethal, very capable counterterrorism force. What we are working to do is make that force more sustainable over time because, frankly, many of the threat actors are still out there and we're still having to do this mission. But being able to make it more sustainable so we can draw on the unique capabilities of the SOF enterprise to bring that to the fight against a potential PRC or Russia, certainly to establish that integrated deterrence we seek, sir.
Thank you.
Senator, I would just add that it is a balance as we look at it across the enterprise with the three missions of the integrated deterrence and counterterrorism crisis response. And as I mentioned before, and we'll reinforce the capabilities we have in the counterterrorism arena transfer as well over into our integrated deterrence approach. But at the same time, we know that very often they are unilaterally asked for. In this case, in Africa, we work with AFRICOM Commander and our Special Operations Command Africa, our TSOC, as a way to address their requirements, keep the pressure. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that SOCOM we look at is the threat has been disrupted, but it persists, and our job is to remain vigilant, and when we can sense, see, and illuminate, we take action in concert with the combatant commanders and certainly under SecDef direction.
Thank you all very much. I have some questions for the record. General Nakasone, I'll submit for you, but I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Secretary Mayer, I want to talk to you about a previous job you had that I still think you're very involved in. I understand that you previously led the DoD Defeat ISIS Task Force. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And that you continue in your role as Assistant Secretary of SOLIC to focus on the anti-terrorism mission, including the defeat of ISIS, correct?
Correct, Senator.
That task force included international partners. I think there were about 80 international partners. And it's fair to say that in your work on that task force and currently, it involved a lot of coordination with Iraqi defense forces. Isn't that correct?
It did, yes, Senator.
I know that my colleagues might have seen that Secretary Austin has paid an unannounced visit to Iraq. The news of that broke this morning. I just want to read a phrase, a quote from him. U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq. He said this following a meeting with Prime Minister al-Sudani. Further, quote, the United States will continue to strengthen and broaden our partnership in support of Iraqi security, stability, and sovereignty. Do you think the U.S. being in partnership with Iraq for their stability and sovereignty, for their own sake and for the region, is an important priority?
Senator, yes, I do, and I think it's critically important to managing a very challenging political situation, too, with obviously the Iranian and proxy threats there as well, sir.
Just for my colleagues, we have 2 war authorizations against the government of Iraq, our strategic partner who Secretary Austin is visiting today. We have 2,500 American troops in Iraq at the Iraqi government's request. One of the war authorizations was passed in 1991. It's 32 years old. The other war authorization was passed in the fall of 2002. The invasion of Iraq began on March 19, 2003, 20 years ago next week. I have a proposal that's very bipartisan. 12 Democrats and 12 Republicans have joined together to urge Congress to repeal the 2 Iraq war authorizations. This is going to be marked up in the Foreign Relations Committee likely in the next few days, and hopefully will be on the floor for a vote soon, coincident in timing with the 20th anniversary of the Iraq invasion. And I just wanted to bring it to the attention of my colleagues. I urge that we repeal the Iraq war authorizations to recognize reality. An enemy that we were trying to push out of Kuwait in 1991, an enemy whose government we wanted to topple in 2002, is no longer an enemy. They're a security partner of importance right now. Second, Congress should exercise our Article I authority over war, peace, and diplomacy and not allow it to be on autopilot. Third, an authorization that is no longer necessary becomes sort of a zombie authorization that can be grabbed and used for mischievous purposes if we're not careful. And fourth, I even think we send a powerful message not just to allies and strategic partners, we even send a message to adversaries that you may be our adversary today. Iraq once was. But the U.S. specializes over time in turning adversaries into allies. Look at Japan, look at Germany, look at other nations, and we hold that hope out to everyone that we will defeat you should we need to, but we also hold out an olive branch and look for an opportunity to beat a sword into a plowshare and turn an adversary into a partner. The proposal that I have, Mr. Chairman, that I hope will be voted on the floor this month has the support of the administration, and they've indicated that neither of the 2 authorizations are necessary for any current U.S. military operation, and thus their repeal will not endanger in any way the security of the United States or Americans anywhere in the world. And I would just urge my colleagues possibly to take a look at this once the Foreign Relations Committee acts, because I believe we will be taking this matter up on the floor very soon. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Mullen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Fenton, can you explain to us, and I know you've been asked this question before, but I just want it for context again. The value of the SOF community.
Senator, I think the value of the SOF community transcends all three missionaries that we have right now. Our integrated deterrence approach, which previous was strategic competition, the days before the tragic events of 9/11, when we were out developing partners and allies, competing for relationships, building partners of force, of choice, and in many places with our security cooperation approach, actually strengthening nations across the globe. I think that's called for even more now. And as we come forward with 20 years of hard-earned combat credibility, a technology fluence, and an incredible formation, the SOF formation is called, it's a formation that knows the hard skills, it knows technology, it deploys around the world on a moment's notice, and in that case, all that value transitions over to integrated deterrence. On the counterterrorism side of the house, Center for 20-plus years, in places all over the world, your Special Operations Command team, along with the rest of our military, interagency and partners, I think brought immense value to this nation, disrupting, degrading terrorist actor networks globally. And figures and names that many folks know here are no longer and have been removed from the battlefield, are no longer a threat to this nation. On crisis response, our ability as SOCOM to do, within a very short notice, deploy forces and arrive in a country and either safeguard our U.S. diplomats, citizens, or rescue them if that is indeed the task, and then bring home safely, I think is all part of this Special Operations Command value proposition. And I would add a very small investment on the budget that we're very grateful for, and I think a very high return on investment across all those and many more that, in the interest of time, I can follow up with you in a classified session.
One last quick question for you, and then if you could be brief on it. I'd like you just kind of explain the partnerships that we have with our allies in Europe and how that is benefiting us in, I would say, with Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine.
Senator, I go back to a very specific part here of the very high value proposition I think your special operations teams bring. It started with a relationship, our ability in small teams to be with Ukrainians in the mid-90s, develop a level of trust. Speed of trust is important in these, as you know very well. And then in 2014, began in earnest a level of training that was about resistance and resilience, and those look like skills of developing a military, Ukrainian special operations that has an NCO corps, that knows about mission command, has initiative, and frankly has been, as I have seen and certainly talk a lot about, very valuable to the Ukrainian military effort writ large. I think we've also had the ability to learn from them. They've got an incredible way that they take equipment off the battlefield, re-engineer it. That's really great for us because we learn as much from our partners as I hope they do from us. So I think in a very small way, that ability for the Ukrainian SOF and the Ukrainian military to resist and now absolutely certainly fight against this aggression and has paid dividends, started with a high investment with your special operations team.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, kind of divvy here a little bit. General Nakasone and I have known each other. And I just want to raise a point here. The General is over a program that's very forward-leaning, and I would ask that we would ask the Senate Intel and the House Intel to brief us on a program that General Nakasone is over, and it will reflect, in my opinion, his complete incompetence and his ability to lead this program. I think it's important when we're talking about a budget that he's over, that it is important for us to know that we have leadership there that we can rely on to make sure the dollars are protected and the investment has a return. And I think before we can do that, we actually need to know what has happened. I was involved in a briefing when I was on the Intel Committee, that turned into a hearing, and I think it's imperative for us to know the general's risk-adverse approach to a program that needs to be extremely proactive.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Your comments have noted, and we will follow up.
Thank you.
At this point, let me recognize Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Nagasone, let me just say I'm sorry, because I have all the confidence in the world in you, and we've been working very close together, and I'm chairman of the Cyber Committee, and also along with Senator Mike Rounds. And we both appreciate your service, and we're looking forward to any hearing you want to have. And but I can tell you have the support of a bipartisan group here, which is very, very deep. Next of all, General Fenton, I would like to ask you a question based on the publishing of the 2019 SecDef DoD Cybercom Operation Forces memo, which directed the organization of DoD Cyber Operation Forces. There has been substantial appropriations development of Cybercom organization and capabilities. The question is, what is the status of the current Special Operations Forces program developed within SOCOM, and what effort is needed to keep pace with Cybercom?
Senator, I'll start by, we've got a very close relationship with General Nakasone and Cybercom, and it's progressed into an area that we now call a capability, soft space cyber triad. At its heart, it's the ability to converge those capabilities, the soft placement access, the cyber work, and certainly the space work, in places for integrated deterrence effects that we would otherwise not get if we were doing it individually, and bring certainly a bigger sum back to not only the mission, but to any partner we're working with.
Okay.
That's been an incredible effort alongside General Nakasone's team. We're very grateful for that, and also in the SpaceCom arena. We are moving that forward with exercises, experimentation, a number of senior leader huddles, and I think that you'll see that progress, Senator, and we'd be happy to talk about the progress.
My final question is for all three of you, and I'll start with Secretary Mayer, then go to General Nagasone, and then to General Fenton. What can we do to help as Congress? What would be the greatest help we could be to you, all of us in the Senate and our Congress, our cohorts over on the other side of the House? That would be the greatest, and I think if I'm asking, having a budget done on time, what does that mean for you?
So, Senator, thanks for the question. I think we will probably all say that having a budget that's consistent, predictable, and on
Does it
time,
save you time? Does it save you money?
It saves us time, it saves us money, it adds predictability, it allows us to put things on contract, and frankly, for...
We're talking September 30th.
Yes, sir, and I think from the perspective of enterprise in the special operations enterprise that's going through transition, the ability to modernize is hurt by the fact that the budgets don't come predictably. So that's really where sometimes it comes home to roost, and it's a...
So a budget on time would be a pretty high priority?
Yes, sir.
General Nagasone.
It's the same thing, Senator. It's on time. It really does.
How does it reduce your cost?
It's predictability. It's being able to, actually spend the money when it's actually due, as opposed to a shortened period of time. We also have new starts that will not be delayed, would actually be able to get on. So we would welcome that.
When's the last time that you had a predictable budget on time?
Not since I've been the commander.
General Fenton.
Senator, I'll start first by, you already help in many ways with a number of the tools that we use at SOCOM, 333, 1202, 127. But to your point on the budget, I'll echo my colleagues here at the table, predictable, reliable, on time. And then I'll just add that CR's hurt. In SOCOM, our priority number 3 is transform. And we think of ourselves as a pathfinder and a trailblazer. And we need new capabilities to not only surpass adversaries, but always to be dominant. That's not possible with new capabilities and new contracts with the CR. It's also, we work with a lot of little companies that want business with Special Ops Command because they know we're transformative and that we're a trailblazer for the department. They can't wait forever to get their money, and many of them aren't there anymore as a result of my sense is of a number of CRs from
Does this make
almost
sense?
2011.
Does this sound reasonable to you all that I've been told by some retired admirals and generals that if we did our budget on time, now by the 85 budget, the budget law that we had, The president's supposed to have his budget submitted by the 1st of February, and here we are. The House and the Senate are supposed to have theirs by April the 1st and reconciled by April the 15th, and then we're supposed to have a budget completed by September 30th. I've been told if all that happened, that the military could have a savings anywhere between 5 to 10%. Well, in today's cost, you're talking $40 to $80 billion. Does that sound reasonable? I mean, it's tremendous. But it has that type of an effect. I don't know if you all looked at and evaluated it per area of DOD. Secretary, you have anything on that, or if you looked at it under those conditions? Because the person never hesitated when they told me this.
So, Senator, I can't account for that exact measure, but I can tell you that it is more costly, and as I think my colleagues and I have indicated, there's a risk to it as well. It's not only financial, it's the ability to execute and operate with some degree of predictability, which, of course, the nation looks at us to do.
Well, I know that we have many examples that you can look back on and find out when we did do one on time and everything, but if you could, and give us an accurate account, or close as accurate as you can be, what would be the savings? Because we're in a position now, we're having debates and discussing, we can do things, we can change this year, change our ways, and not commit the sins of the past, and I'm hoping that we can do that. But it has a tremendous effect on our military, which is what we're depending. First of all, thank all of you and all of you sitting there for your service. I appreciate it more than you know. And again, I want to thank you all. I yield my time back.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Senator Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Fenton, I appreciate the time we had to spend together and talk about some of the threats around the world and your role and your team's role in combating those threats and getting ahead of those threats. And to me, as I mentioned, there is no greater threat than China on the world stage. And in this, great powers era that we've been discussing, the alliances in the Indo-Pacific to me are critical. You've mentioned it. In my meeting with you, we've heard about that today. General Nakasone had mentioned Indonesia and the Philippines. We've talked about the Philippines. What specifically would you like to see this committee address as we move forward in this Congress to do everything we can to put ourselves in the best position to continue to cultivate and support those alliances?
Senator, first, thanks for the session with you the other day. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. I would comment on the extreme importance and the power of the partners and allies. You and I spoke quite a bit about it, and in the Indo-Pacific, but certainly globally, as the Secretary has discussed with the Department, and in many ways is doing that with the NATO alliance vis-a-vis Ukraine, and all the work that has gone into the entire whole of government team to make that stronger than ever as a signal that aggression by adversaries like Russia will not be tolerated. I think it's just as important as we discussed in the Indo-Pacific. We've got a number of bilateral treaty allies out there. They are extremely important partners as Indo-PACOM goes ahead on its daily and certainly its overall mission. In particular for the Special Operations Team, we actually like to think that we're a premier partner for us. We have longstanding ties throughout the region that we look to continue to strengthen and maintain, and we certainly each and every day don't take them for granted, and we look to reinforce them. I think that's important that continues to grow. And I think it's, as you think about this, Senator, it's about the growth of partners and allies and the power in that, not only for the rules-based order, but probably for the envisionment of where we go the next 3 to 5, even 10 years. So I would just recommend that it's a continued focus on partners and allies, the power that comes with that, the partnering, the burden sharing, and certainly the capability growth that we've all experienced in that. And I could talk certainly more in a
Well, and I don't want you to, I want to give you the time to be able to get back to my office with this, because this is something that to me is of paramount importance, particularly in the Indo-Pacific theater. And it'll be a long-term commitment on my end. And as you work through this. And by the way, you won't be the only one I'm asking this question that comes before the committee of what can we do, because I do think that's just critical in doing everything we can to guard against China's global domination ambition, which has been stated. And so I want to work with you on that. And I guess, General Nakasone, if I could ask you this, and to the extent that you can share, what you can share with this committee in the open setting here, just where we're at with China's capabilities, whether it's on cyber or AI, our defensive capabilities versus their offensive capabilities. This will be an ongoing discussion, but in the open setting, I certainly wanted to ask you about that.
Senator, they're a near peer threat. They are very good. They have been able, over the period of 2 decades, to develop not only their military, but also their industrial base. As we look to the future, those capacity and capabilities, whether or not it's in artificial intelligence, machine learning, whether or not it's looking at the capacity to grow cyber forces, they are very good. But they are not, first of all, as good as us, and secondly, they are not 10 feet tall. And so we can get in closed session more in terms of some thoughts on this, but I did want to make sure I hit that.
Well, and I'll just close with this. I agree with the concerns that have been raised by other committee members and you with TikTok. To me, TikTok is a Chinese AI weapon aimed directly at the United States of America, and we better take it seriously. So, among other things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just have to say, I had a wonderful working relationship with Senator Blunt, who has recently retired. And I would have to say, Senator Smith, I agree with you with your concerns on the Indo-Pacific region. And in fact, my question, gentlemen, is going to follow up a little bit on my colleague's line of questioning. But I did want to start with saying that, Mr. Assistant Secretary and General Fulton, your written testimony references the first soft truth: humans are more important than hardware. And I couldn't agree with this more. And 2 weeks ago, I led a CODEL to Japan and Indonesia. My interactions on that trip reinforced just how important those alliances and partnerships are. We must not forget that human ties are the United States' strategic advantage in the Indo-Pacific region, and these human relationships are critical to countering malign CCP activity in that region. General Fenton, I appreciated our discussion last week, and can you please elaborate furthermore in that questioning line and on an unclassified level on how the SOF community fosters close relationships with our allies and partners? Specifically, how does Special Operations Command's ongoing work with other nations, from the smallest unit operations all the way up through your leadership-to-leadership relationships with military leaders in some of these countries, reinforce our campaign plans in Southeast Asia?
Senator, thank you. And I really appreciate our discussion as well, and I appreciate your reference in that. I'll start with just emphasizing that partners and allies are absolutely a key focus for the department, the secretary, and for your Special Operations Command team. And I put that in contrast to what China's focus may be in terms of clients or customers. We're about partnerships. We're about friendships. We're about the power of many to make us all stronger. And I think we see that in the way that we approach. Firstly, your Special Operations team, as you mentioned, we start very, very much from a perspective of it's in our training and in our schoolhouses to work through these, because we recognize it's the speed of trust. It's the speed of relationship in many ways with partners and teammates around the world. You'll see us at a very tactical level. And I won't mention any countries, and certainly, Senator, I could talk more in a closed session. You'll see us at a tactical level doing events like training, shooting, jumping, driving, and building capabilities that use the tools that this committee has honored us with. I think at an organizational level, we'll be showing folks how we've grown ourselves in the 20-plus years of combat, what it meant to weave in technology, how we understand gathering of intelligence, how we understand mission-type orders. And I think at the institutional level, what you'll see your Special Operations team do in any of the COCOMs is work with the COCOMs to ensure that the nation we have a relationship with understands its Special Operations Forces and what they can do, the types of missions, and if I may be, the return on investment and the value that they will bring that nation. in a way that I believe we certainly bring this nation.
Thank you, General. Turning now to General Nakasone. General, I just want to say I too have complete trust in your ability to do your job. And in fact, your forward-leaning posture allowed us to keep tabs on the well-being of my constituent who was held in Haqqani Network hands and also in his safe return. So thank you very much for the work of you and your subordinates in that. I want to talk about the cyber domain. Of course, it has no boundaries. I include legislation in fiscal year 2021 NDAA authorizing DoD to establish a pilot program to enhance the cybersecurity of our allies, and in particular, the readiness of military forces of Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. And this year, I plan to expand that program to include Malaysia and the Philippines. Could you elaborate on specifically why the cybersecurity of our allies and partners is important for U.S. overall, U.S. national security? And if possible, can you comment on the value of direct engagement with our overseas partners to help build their cyber skills and how that is important for our own national security?
Certainly, Senator. I think that there's no better example than Ukraine. We've watched this now for over a year. We're a very capable partner that was able to raise their level of cybersecurity, was able to fend off a much larger foe. But it's not only that, it's also the ability for us to share information with that partner. We want to be able to share our information in the future, and being able to share information in cyberspace means that you have to have an assurance that the partner can secure your information. And that's a critical piece, and I know that the work that you've done to drive that type of cybersecurity, both from the element of the bar has to go higher for our partners to operate, but also we have to have the confidence that we share information, that our information is between us and that partner.
Thank you. I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Duckworth. Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank each of you for being here. General Nakasone, first let's talk about China. Is there anything that China sells us? We have cranes now at the port in Miami, that they're worried that there was the ability for China to surveil what we're doing at our ports. You look at what some of my colleagues have talked about, the risk of TikTok. Is there anything that China sells in this country that you don't believe creates a potential cybersecurity risk? And what would it be that they could sell us that wouldn't?
Senator, certainly you point to the challenge of cyber, which is a huge attack surface, right? There's whether or not you trade in some type of good or you trade in some type of commodity, there's always that opportunity. I think this points to the challenge that we have to be able to address, which is supply chain, to make sure that the elements of the supply chain that we operate, particularly within the Department of Defense, are secure.
So do you think that Americans should have, do you think it puts America at risk if Americans have TikTok on their phone?
My concern with TikTok, Senator, really is from two pieces. One is the fact that there's tremendous amount of data, and understanding where your data is critical, I think. And the second piece is the opportunity for influence. This is a means upon which you receive information or don't receive information, and that's where I always look at that in terms of being able to measure that risk.
So if you were running let's say one of our electrical grids in the country, if you were responsible, knowing now what you know in the job that you have now, would you buy anything from China? Would you allow the employees to have TikTok? Would you do any business? Would you buy DJI drones? Would you do anything knowing what you know and now in this job?
Senator, very difficult in the scenario that you point to our picture to imagine that you can really do that. I mean, there's so much of what we do is based upon international trade, and China has the corner on some things. I think what I would do is ensure that the areas that are most sensitive to our operation are well censored, and I have the confidence that what's being utilized there, I understand where that information may be going.
In a world where there was an alternative to every Chinese product and app and service out there, if there was an American alternative or American ally alternative to them, would you, at that point, if you were running one of these companies, would you guarantee that your company did no business with China if there was a good alternative? And would you think the same thing about our government, knowing what you know?
So again, coming back as a perspective, perhaps future business owner, I would take a very, very hard look of anything that was coming from an adversarial nation and being able to understand that.
General Fenton, can you talk about what are the things you're doing to prepare your forces to deal with China, and where are they beating us, and where and what do we need to do more and better, knowing that China doesn't like our way of life and wants to demolish our way of life?
Senator, I think the very first thing we're doing in Special Operations Command to focus the formation on the adversaries of China and Russia, but in particular China's reorienting the formation in terms of focus. There are a number of elements in our formation that understand the PRC and what they've been doing for years pretty well. But there's work that we've got to do to certainly bring in additional portions of the formation along. We do much of that through our education process in our schoolhouses at all the components, our Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine components, and frankly at our Joint Special Operations University. Understanding of the PRC and the PRC way of warfare, we knew that very well when we fought the ISIS threat. We understood how they were going to wage war, and now that's the understanding of the PRC. Second, I would say, is being present in any region and trying to understand their malign activities. As I mentioned before, diplomatic pressure from the PRC, economic coercion from the PRC creates clients and customers. We're out there to build partners and allies. And I think that also allows us to get a sense of what PRC's malign activities are globally. And then on any given sense, Senator, we're providing ranges of options for the combatant commanders and certainly for the Secretary to address either in deterrence, preparing, and if needed, to prevail. And you've got the best special operations team in the world to do that. And at the same time, we're presenting a lot of dilemmas to the adversary, the PRC.
Thank each of you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen, please.
Well, thank you, Chairman Reed. I really appreciate you holding this hearing. I'd like to thank each one of the witnesses for being here and, of course, for everyone's service to our nation. And so, General Nakasone, I have quite a few questions for you on our cyber workforce and Nevada National Guard, but I'm going to get into cyber workforce first because the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which was released just last week, it calls for expanding the national cyber workforce. I know it's critical we continue to invest in innovative, non-traditional cyber capabilities and in talent to support the Department of Defense cyber mission requirements. So in last year's NDAA, as reported out of this committee, it included my Civilian Cyber Reserve Act. Bipartisan legislation I introduced with Senator Blackburn to create a civilian cyber reserve that ensures additional cyber capacity for cybercom in times of greatest need. And so this year, of course, I look forward to working with the chairman to ensure this critically important legislation will be included in the final conference. But I was hoping, General, that you could discuss the value of reserve models, including the value of a potential civilian cybersecurity reserve to support your cyberspace operations.
Senator, first of all, thank you for your support of U.S. Cyber Command and in general, the work that we do in cyberspace. It begins with humans. And so this idea of being able to have many more analysts, many more operators, many more developers is something that is, part and parcel to our success in the future. It's not only with the civilian workforce that you've championed, but it's also this idea of how do you bring a larger base to bear? How do we bring it from K through 12 that makes people very interested that science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it's the way of the future. Girls that code, all these things that will provide a greater base for us to draw from are really important to us.
Well, you're speaking my language as a former software developer, the co-founder of the Women in STEM Caucus, and trying to promote STEM education all the time. This is music to my ears. And so, of course, in fiscal year 2021, the NDAA required the Department of Defense to submit to Congress an evaluation of the reserve models to support these cyberspace operations. And the report was never submitted. So could you update me on the status of the report and also the requirement I added in the FY23 bill to have DoD enter into an agreement to assess the benefits of such a program. I'd really like to see us be able to move forward on this.
Senator, if I might take that for the record, just to make
Yep.
sure I can leverage the Department of Defense for that.
That would be perfect. I have some other questions too on a specifically for Nevada National Guard, but you know, the National Cybersecurity Strategy rightly identifies strengthening our international partner capacity. It's a pillar of our collective cybersecurity. Our hunt forward operations in Ukraine in particular, they really show us the value of international partnerships. I've advocated for more funding for hunt forward as we identify more vulnerabilities. And so our Nevada National Guard, we have 3 partner nations as the National Guard State Partnership Program: Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. So how is the program promoting cyber partnerships with our allies and partners, and what challenges do you see are you facing building these, and where can we create a better strategy for this command?
So first of all, I see very few few limitations on what we need to do in the future. The countries that you talk about there in the Southwest Pacific, we've worked very closely with our partners in Australia to look at how do we kind of incorporate all of them as we understand their needs, their requirements, their vulnerabilities, and then be able to assist them. A very small amount of money and a very small amount of time yields tremendous results, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I want to tell you that I'm also very excited because Department of Homeland Security recently announced another cyber strategy as it's going to expand the Abraham Accords collaboration among the U.S., Israel, UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco to include cybersecurity. And so as you work to promote multilateral partnerships between the Abraham Accord countries, how do you think this is going to help you with that?
Well, just think about hunt forward operations. We began those in 2018. Since 2018, 47 different missions, 22 countries, 70 different networks. And when we take a look at what's been able to be done, what we've been able to do is the fact that, one, it builds tremendous confidence between nations, right? When the United States deploys a hunt forward team to country X knows that the United States cares. And it is for us being able to work with a partner to understand their requirements and then also build a higher bar of cybersecurity.
Well, thank you for being there. We have heard that from our allies and partners. It means a lot when you're there, you show up, and we work in partnership with others to help potentiate what they're doing to protect themselves. So thank you again. My time is up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rosen, and the open portion of the hearing has concluded. For the benefit of my colleagues who might be listening, we have 2 votes. One is already underway. We will adjourn here and convene our closed session in SVC 217 immediately following this. I urge my colleagues to vote and then join us. I would also like to commend the panel for their excellent testimony. We've done our excellent testimony, and also Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. General Fenton and Mr. Mayor, I know this has been touched on, but it's an issue that I think is really important. How is the shift going from your rightful and exceptional focus on CT operations, primarily in the CENTCOM AOR, to the Indo-PACOM region as our pacing threat? And what is the kind of orientation of the strategy in that region? And what I mean by that is the CT SOCOM focus post 9/11 was very kinetic, which our guys did an incredible job at. But the Indo-PACOM strategy and focus is not kinetic, at least not now. We all hope it's never going to be kinetic. So it's a very different mission set. I don't know if that impacts morale. It's not as, well, I'd like both of you to talk about that, because I've been concerned that it's been hard. You've done such a good job in that AOR, and that AOR is still important. And the issue of making sure that violent extremist organizations do not threaten our nation, particularly with weapons of mass destruction, is still critical. But the pacing threat is China. Every day we see something. You saw the foreign minister of China yesterday publicly saying, hey, we're on a collision course towards war. We don't want that, but we better well be ready for it. And your operators are the best in the world. There's no Chinese forces that can hold a candle to the U.S. Special Operations enterprise, not even close. So it's a giant strategic advantage we have over them. I want them to fear the hell out of it. So what are we doing, and how's that shift going?
So, Senator, thanks for the question. Maybe I'll start, and then General Fenn can address some of the issues that are core to his force here. So, I would say the shift is very much underway, but I think it's a question of how do we maintain the counterterrorism capabilities, because if you look at the map, sir, of course, many of the areas that were problems continue to be problems. So we're having to manage that risk. At the same time, we are doing, as you correctly said, sir, a different mission in the Indo-Pacific. And I think the idea that we're not very kinetic or not kinetic at all in the Indo-Pacific is not necessarily something that means that the same kind of soft skills are not relevant. So as we think of things like placement and access, and really relying on partners sometimes for that placement and access, but also the ability to work unilaterally, go to places, that last tactical mile that at times only U.S. Special Operations can do, that's still relevant in the Indo-Pacific, even if the finish is not a kinetic or lethal finish. Good. And I think, second, Senator, I would highlight the by, with, and through approach, really working through partners, that has really been the hallmark of the counterterrorism efforts, especially the last decade or so, is very, very relevant, again, in the Indo-Pacific, because we want our partners to be in the lead, but we've demonstrated in places like Ukraine, we can do that from a distance. So yeah, it doesn't have to be the hand on the shoulder that we've been familiar with in the past. So I think these fundamental tools and approaches we've used are still very relevant in the Indo-Pacific, sir.
General Fenton, how's the reorientation of the Indo-PACOM theater going?
Yes, Senator, if I might, I'm going to start by agreeing with you that your special operations formation is the best, the very best in the history of
Chinese
mankind.
don't have anything remotely close to it. And they know that, we know that.
And I agree with that. And the same thing with Russia and any other adversary out there.
That's right.
And the other part is that we exist included with the entirety of the U.S. military, and the cybercom team is exactly the best, and we have all that. So I think, and I would want everybody that wishes this nation harm, and if there's an adversary out there, China,
but I just want the
fear.
Indo-PACOM theater to know that we're out there too, right?
Yes, sir.
I want the Chinese to wake up thinking they got Navy SEALs all over them every day.
Yes, sir. And your special operations team is out there in a very sustainable, durable way, and in a concert with Admiral Aquilino's requirements. And I would tell you that we can handle these challenges. And I'll start by saying special operations really never left strategic competition and integrated deterrence. And you and I talked about this, Senator, I think last year, where I was the special ops commander responsible in the Pacific for the special operations forces that both did counterterrorism with one partner that I could talk more in a closed session about, but competed with the PRC all day long by building partnerships, relationships, and capability. That continues. At the same time, we will not take our eye off the persistent threat of global terrorism, and so we will still handle the CT mission. And there will be a number of our forces that have the CT mission each and every day, hunting anybody that wishes harm to this nation, but can slide over to present some level of dilemma to an adversary in an integrated deterrence arena. And I would just add, much of our counterterrorism experience is desired by these partners and nations as we go forward to train, and becomes a key part of the partnership. So, Senator, I would just end with, your SOCOM team is absolutely ready to handle that challenge. I think there's a large portion of our force that is excited about this. They want to do what the nation needs. And right now, the nation needs us to get very involved, and we are, and deter PRC, and certainly to address aggression by the Russians. And they want to be knee-deep in it. You know your special operations team well. And at the same time, handle the counterterrorism mission and any crisis response mission where U.S. Citizen or diplomat need to be safeguarded or rescued.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Sullivan.
And I just want to say to General Nakasone, no question, I just think you're publicly, because a lot of what you do is not public, I think you and your team are doing an exceptional job, General. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. The open session has concluded again. We have 2 votes. I urge my colleagues to go to the first vote. We will resume immediately in SVC 217 for the closed session. And to each of you, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. General Fenton, Secretary Mayor, General Nakasone, let me tell you, you've all been extremely diligent, dedicated, and offered superb service to this nation over many years, and we are in your debt. Thank you all very much for that. I'll adjourn the open hearing.